My name is Nicholas Mollo, so I'm going to be a moderator for this session. So we are going to have a panel discussion. It is about the best interest of the child. So this panel will be discussing about the following topic, which is who decides and how the best interest of the child in home education under the BELA Act. So our panel members, we have 3 members who will be joining the panel. We have Prof. Mariette Reineck, and then we have Prof. Rolf Reineck, and we have Uda Divet. So we have 3 panel members. So as I call them, they will come and make, especially Prof. Mariette will make a 8 to 10 minutes presentation just to introduce you to this topic. And thereafter, Prof. Rolf Reineck will also follow. So Uda will join them when we start with the panel discussion. So I don't want to waste time because this issue of the best interest of a child is very important. As you know, the Constitution of South Africa does promote that right for children. So we only have 1 hour for this session. So I just want to give you enough time, and then I will make my remarks at the end so that I just summarize everything in terms of what the presenters or the panel members has said, so that it will be a take home for you. So I'm not going to say a lot now so that I see whether can I have 5 minutes just to make my remarks at the end. So I want you to engage the panel members, because when we are looking at the previous panel, something that is related to the best interest of a child has been mentioned. But we looked also international, looking at the international law. So they will be basically focusing on the South African perspective so that we know how do we promote home education also so that children and even parents enjoy this right. So it is very important. Just to give you maybe something that you need to know before they come, Prof. Mariette will provide a legal background, okay, and the principles of the best interest of a child. So that will be her focus. Then Prof. Rolf will address the best interest of a child from a school social worker perspective. And then Uda then will introduce the voice of the ordinary homeschooler and the practical challenges they face into this discussion, into the panel discussion. So without any waste of time, let me allow Prof. Mariette to make a presentation so that we save our time. Thank you, and you are welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the privilege to be here. So I'm going to start on what does the concept of the best interest of the child entail. So what I'm saying is the result of reading a lot of cases by our courts, and I'm going to start off by starting with the constitutional provision that says the best interest of the child is of paramount importance in every matter concerning the child. Okay, so that is the constitutional provision. And then this becomes the bone of contention where parents will say, but I know what is in the best interest of the child because I'm the parent. And the department says, but we know what is the best interest of the child. But eventually the court will have to decide what is in the best interest of the child. And the question is, how is that determined? So, but before we can actually say that this is or that is in the best interest of the child, we have to remember that the concept of the best interest of the child is a very challenging concept. It is not something that you can put in a little box, put a bow around it and say, this is the best interest of the child. So there's a lot of shortcomings. And we know that the best interest of the child principle is relative in relation to space and time. It depends on the culture. It depends on the time. What was in the best interest of the child in the 60s is not in the best interest of the child today. So a universal set of norms is not possible. We cannot say, give us a list. Or homeschoolers, this is your list. So when we try to determine the best interest of the child, we are first and foremost looking for as much as possible information. So therefore, we, for instance, and part of this decision is, should the child be homeschooled or not? Is this homeschooling good enough and in the best interest of the child? We have, for instance, to think about what is in the short, medium, and long-term best interest of the child? Now that the child is 6 years old, when the child is 16 years old or 26 years old, how do we know that? We cannot predict the future. So to say whatever we say is in the best interest of the child becomes very complex. And who decides what is in the best interest of the child? The parent, the DBE, the officials. And in the end, if we cannot sort it out among ourselves, we will end up in the court where the High Court, as the upper guardian of children, will look at all the facts and then have to make a determination on what is in the best interest of the child. So as I've said, the best interest of the child and test is unpredictable and depends on our subjective opinions. As a parent, I think X, Y, and Z is very important. As a departmental official, someone else can think A, B, and C is very important. So how do we determine what is in the best interest of the child? And this leads to a lot of uncertainty and a lot of misconceptions, a lot of mistrust and conflict. And I think that is the concern of homeschooling parents, that they feel, but someone else will come and decide what is in the best interest of my child, and they don't know my child. So we know that from case law. The courts is not oblivious to the fact that the best interest of the child is very vague, and as I said, change over time. We also know that the best interest of the child is sometimes used or misused to actually advance the rights and interests of adults. It's not about the child, but I use the child as a pawn to actually benefit me as an adult, and there's a lot of cases on that. We also know that social realities can limit a child's best interest. If there's no resources, there's no resources. There's not enough money for education. In the homeschooling education, one of the realities can be that state officials don't know enough about homeschooling, but we can also have poorly equipped parents who should not do homeschooling. And both of those things can be against the best interest of the child. So we have to look for ways of actually trying to give more substance to the idea of the best interest of the child. And we find some general principles in the Children's Act, Section 6. And there it says, these principles that I'm quickly going to highlight now is applicable to all legislation. So it is also applicable to Section 51, dealing with homeschool, and is applicable to all organs of state, and in all proceedings, actions, or decisions pertaining to a child. For instance, should this child get homeschooling or not, or should this child be registered or not, we have to remember that this decision or action must respect, protect, promote, and fulfill all the human rights of the child. In particular, the child's right to dignity, equity, and fairness, and it should not lead to unfair discrimination. All our decisions must ensure that we look at the developmental needs of the child and that there's enough time for the child to play and have recreational activities. We have to pay specific attention to the needs of children with special needs, and we have to look at the views of the family. So in a decision to register a child for homeschooling, these are things that that state officials must take into account. So then if we get to a point where we are in conflict with the department, we have to follow a process of conciliation and problem solving. We have to talk to one another. We have to find common ground and what is in the best interest of the child, not just run to the courts and lock each other out of the discussion. We have to look at proper ways to solve and find the best interest of a particular child, and we should not delay actions and decisions. So when we work with children, we have to make our decisions fast, and processes must be concluded fast and efficient. And obviously, if a decision is taken, the department must inform us promptly. So I'm not going to talk about the other provisions that's in the Children's Act. Ruth will look at those, but you will see that there are specific factors on what we take into account to determine the best interest of the child in the Children's Act, how we should apply it, and again, that also the Children's Act confirms that the best interest of the child is of paramount importance. So the problem is there's a lot of factors, but how much weight do we give to the different factors? That causes another problem for us. And as I've already said, the best interest of the child is an evolving concept, just as homeschooling and how homeschooling is done is evolving over time. So we still don't have a solid answer on that. We also see that the best interest of the child principle often provides us with exceptions for justification for exceptions. So sometimes we don't follow the rules, sometimes we make mistakes, but it is exactly then the best interest. I say, it doesn't help you to put the parent in jail. It's not in the best interest of the child, for instance, to do that. Okay, so sometimes illegal behavior will be condoned if it is in the best interest of the child. And we also see that, as I've said, the best interest of the child is very vague and depend on the facts of each case. But this is also the strength of the best interest of the child, where we say that when we determine the best interest of the child, we look at the individual circumstances of that particular child. It is not a tick box exercise because every child's needs and interests are unique. And that is the beauty of the best interest of the child. And we also see that the Constitutional Court said that we cannot have a one-size-fits-all approach to the best interest of the child. The best interests of the child do not apply indifferently to groups of children. We have to look and dissect the needs of every child as an individual. And then we cannot give exhaustive content to the South. In the South, we didn't, and we cannot give exhaustive content to what is in the best interest of the child. So that is impossible, and the Constitutional Court had also said that it is undesirable to do that. In S versus M, it is one of the most important constitutional cases dealing with the best interest of the court, of the child. The court said, and I think the bottom line of it is, we can throw the idea of the best interest of the child into every discussion. But if we spread it too thin, if we use it loose and fast, it loses its force and its applicability. So we have to really think about how do we give content to the best interest of the child. In South Africa, we use the best interest of the child as a principle, but it's also elevated to a constitutional right, which means that I can go to court and actually say, this is not in the best interest of the child, and this conduct is unconstitutional, and the court can make that ruling. And we say that the best interest of the child is of paramount importance. That means it's emphatic, it is of supreme importance, it's chief importance. And does it mean then that we always tip the scales in favor of the child? No, it does not mean that. It means that we have to look at our wording. So in terms of the UNCRC, we say the best interest of the child is a primary consideration. The African charters say the best interest of the child is the primary consideration, while the constitution say it is of paramount importance. So it seems as though we have a higher standard, but the Constitutional Court already said that the best interest of the child does not trump the right of others, and the best interest of the child can also be limited. I'm not going to talk about the guidelines for now. I need to get to these two slides where we see that to just determine what is in the best interest of the child is very difficult. So we can use the best interest of the child as a substantive argument, but what we find in case law is that whenever a court has to make a decision, they often use other rights to inform what is in the best interest of the child. So we will look at what does the right to dignity say in these circumstances, what does the right to equality say, what does the right to personal security say, and what does the right to education say? And all that information together will inform us on what is in the best interest of the child in this particular circumstances. So if we look at the right to education, and Ignacy already referred to it, when we have to determine what is in the best interest of the child, we also have to look at what does the right to education entail. You will act in the best interest of your child if the education as homeschooler that you provide to your child will lead to the holistic development of your child and realizes his or her full potential. Secondly, if the education that you provide will actually teach your child relationships with others and respect for human rights. Then we have general comments. But I first want to go to the aims of education. So here, and there's a lot of people that actually are concerned about the state is going to prescribe to me how should I actually teach my children and want to infringe on my rights to religion, etc. Now let's see at what does the international ratified Convention on the Rights to Education say about the aims of education. State parties agree that education of the child shall be directed to the development of the child's personality, talents, mental and physical abilities to its fullest potential. If you do that, you are fine. And then, state parties agree that the development of respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms is part and of the aims of education. So as long as you teach respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms, you will be fine. One of the aims of education is the development of respect for the child's parents, his or her own cultural identity, language and values, for the national values of the country, in which a child is living or originate for, and for that of others. Very important. We realize the right to education when we prepare the child for responsible adult life, where we teach children tolerance, freedom, equality, and if we teach children respect for natural resources. If you do that in your homeschooling, you are acting in the best interest of your child, and you will be fine. Then, how do we know? If education is available, accessible, acceptable, and adaptable in what you do in homeschooling, you will be fine, because then you are acting in the best interest of the child. Thank you. Sorry, Chair.
Thank you very much. Let's give to Prof. Rolf Reineck. Okay, let's welcome.
Thank you, Nicholas. I'll start in the meantime. Good afternoon, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here. I am going to add to what Mariette said, and maybe just so that you understand where I come from. I work from the perspective of social work. My focus is school social work, but child protection in schools. So what I'm going to do is just very shortly explain to you the best interests of the child from the perspective of the Children's Act. Now, what this actually does is it provides some guidelines for homeschoolers in terms of a few general standards. Now, the first one is, and I'm quickly going to read that, the capacity of the parents or any specific parent or any other caregiver or person to provide for the needs of the child, including emotional and intellectual needs. So it's really very important that in whatever you do, you make sure that you provide in that. These others are there. We will send them out to you. At this point, we don't have time to talk about all of them, but what I want to highlight is the last one there: protect the child from any physical and psychological harm. Now, for us, it is important to ensure that the child is not neglected or abused. Now, in one of my next slides, I'm just going to highlight a bit what we consider in terms of neglect as well as care, because that's where we actually get to the parental responsibilities of parents. Something else that I think is also important is children with disabilities. I don't think that many of our mainstream schools are actually focused on the needs of children with special needs. And as homeschoolers, I think that there's definitely a very specific area to ensure that children are protected in terms of their right to basic education, and that these special needs are also recognized. But yeah, that is a discussion on its own. So from a social work perspective, we will always consider if a child is neglected or not. Tomorrow I will go into this in the panel discussion in a bit more detail. But what it actually refers to, if we look at the definition of neglect in the Children's Act, it actually refers to parents failing in their parental responsibilities. And Section 18 of the Children's Act refers to what is seen as parental responsibilities. And the first thing that it highlights is that a parent has to care for a child. But then we ask ourselves, but what do we mean by care? The Act actually helps us with that when it actually tells us that care means that you have to look at the general well-being and development of your child. And we need to consider the holistic development of the child. So if you, and Mariette referred to that just now, if we look at the aims of education, the aims of education is actually very much focused on the holistic development of the child. It also refers to the Bill of Rights, and Mariette referred to that now, so I'm not going to say anything about that. E, guiding, directing, and securing the child's education. Now, if we say what's in the best interest of a child, I don't think that there's any argument that we should ensure that the child has a proper education. And personally, I think if a home educator does what is supposed to happen and provide a proper education, there isn't too many people that will have a problem with that. I spoke to a few people in the Free State as part of my preparation for this conference, and in general people said that, and now I'm referring to social workers, if the child receives an education, and because we are not educationists, if it seems that it is a proper education, we're not going to bother. But I'll talk about that tomorrow as well. And then accommodating of any special needs that a child may have. Now earlier you would have seen that part of the Children's Act says that we don't want children to experience environments where they feel unsafe and all those kind of things, where they are bullied and all those kind of environments. So I think that is a very good reason, if you want to call it that, for why we should consider home education. And then the last one there, again, the question of what is in the best interest of the child. Then, when we refer to children's rights, section 28.1, that says that every child has the right to, and I want to only focus on the last one, to be protected from maltreatment, neglect, abuse, and degradation. So if you ensure that the child is protected, that there is no neglect, that there is no abuse, then there shouldn't be any problems in terms of that. So, and then just my last slide to remind you that everyone has the right to a basic education. So if I can just very quickly summarize, if I look at what we see in the Children's Act, and if we measure that against what's in the best interest of the child, if you are doing what you're supposed to do, if you are developing a well-rounded child, you look at the holistic development of the child, from the perspective of the Children's Act, you shouldn't have any problems. Yeah, that's it from our side.
All right, thank you very much for your presentation, Prof. Rolf. Now I think we are moving towards engaging you. Uda, you are also welcome. Thank you very much for joining the panel. So we are at it's 2:30 now. So I'm giving you the 30 minutes that you should enjoy now. It's yours, okay? I've noted some of you are busy writing questions and all that. So I want to give you this time, 30 minutes, full 30 minutes, so that you ask all the questions that you had about the best interest of the child. So the panel is ready. Remember what I said about their focus in terms of their presentation. So, but you can ask any question about the best interest of a child, and then they will see how they respond to that question. But just to summarize, as I've indicated to you, that I'm going to have a few minutes for the remarks. What I got from them, the first thing that was said by Prof. Mariette is that this principle, which is also a right, is vague. So what does that mean? I think she mentioned that you cannot just only promote the best interest of the child and forget about other rights. So there are other rights that support it so that it is able to be stable and well promoted. Remember, if we say the best interest of a child, the other rights that you might think of is the right to education. Because you cannot say that the child should enjoy the right to the best interest of the child, or the right to their best interest, while at the end, educationally, that right is infringed. They have even mentioned the issue of safety. For instance, it is a requirement that whether it's a homeschooling or they attend the normal schools that we are used to, or it's an independent schooling and all that. The issue of safety is also important, and that is a right. So it is very important that you also think about that. The issue of privacy and all that. So all these rights assist a child to enjoy that right. So it's very important that anyone who wants to promote that right also think about those rights. And the other thing, we need to know that all the rights can be limited. I won't dwell much, but the rights are limited, and then if there are valid reasons that they should be limited. So what I have also wrote down, because I was busy writing when they were busy presenting here, is that we need to engage the state. For instance, in this case, the Department of Basic Education. Organizations such as Pestalozzi should not be quiet about the issue of the right of the children, especially when it comes to homeschooling, because that is part of the South African Schools Act, and then it should be promoted. So engaging them, Mariette indicated that it becomes a last option to go to courts. So we have to start engaging the state in terms of what is not going well in terms of the implementation or the application of this law. And then I just want to summarize what Rolf has indicated. He spoke about the considering a child holistically. So it is not only that we should focus on education, but we need to look at the issue of emotions. How does a child feel socially and all that, those aspects. So in any type of education, all those aspects should be considered. And he mentioned the issue of caring again, that if you have a child in a homeschooling environment and the child, safe, and the people are caring for a child and all that, so then there's nothing wrong, because you meet those requirements of a best interest of a child, which is in terms of social workers that they are looking for, is there enough caring. Also, he mentioned the issue of safety. Remember, safety can be physically, more emotionally, and all that. I think he emphasized that. So then the last thing, the issue of safety was my last point that I noted. So I know that there is something that you want to ask there are questions that you want to ask. But before I can allow you to ask, after their presentation, there is something that came into their mind that I forgot this. I'm going to give them 2 minutes, including Uda, because Uda didn't make a presentation. But I want her to just make a statement before the audience can ask questions. All of them, I'll give them 2 minutes to make a statement, then we allow you to ask questions.